we get a lot of questions on the board, Bengal Tiger subscribers who have jumped on board with us, asking us, hey, is it a down year in Louisiana? Shea, this year, as it stands, LSU does have double-digit offers out, but there's still that kind of something in the back of your mind that says maybe it is. Maybe they might have to go more regionally and find players out of state. What say you as far as early on in this recruiting process, looking at this state as they now become the soon-to-be seniors, the ones that are going to have to make these college decisions relatively soon?
I'm looking right now, Billy, at the rankings for the 2024 class, which is what we're in Louisiana. These are the On3 rankings. Now, they're going to get updated here soon, so this will change. We'll get a better feel for it. But right now, in the top 100, there's just one guy, Wardell Mack. I think they could end up having a few guys in the top 100 nationally. I think depending on where everybody is ranking guys across the industry, there's Trades Green, a tight end out of East Feliciana, obviously Juwan Johnson, who committed to Colorado. There's Tylen Singleton out of Manny. I'm curious to see kind of where the dust may settle, but no, there aren't any 5 stars out there that we've seen. And there's really only a handful right now that have positioned themselves in the top 100. But I did the math here because really at the end of the day, a down year in Louisiana to me means you can't tap into Louisiana to build the bulk of your class or, nearly half of your class. And I'll give you the numbers from the past 5 years. And this doesn't give a total picture, but at least gives you kind of a feel for the direction they've trended. Mind you, 2 classes ago, 2022, is when they had the coaching change from Kelly or Orgeron to Kelly. So a little bit of recruiting kind of turnover there led to an odd class. But point being, over the past 5 years, here's their offer count in Louisiana. Last year, 19. The year before, 24. Again, it was a transition year. I would have that number lower than it actually was. Year prior to that, 13. Year before that, 18. Year before that, 15. So on average, they're offering about 18 guys in Louisiana a year, whether it was Orgeron into the Kelly era. That's about how many guys ultimately get offered. Right now, they've already offered 11, and we're a year from signing day, or at least 9-10 months from December's signing period. These guys have spring evaluations. They have summer camp. They have senior seasons. That number will continue to grow. I'm comfortable saying that they'll probably get up to what the average has been. If they're at 11 offers now and the average is 18, there will be more guys in Louisiana who emerge and get offers. And there's guys who, Billy, you just put up an article on 3 today on the Bengal Tiger about Dominic McKinley, got offered within the past couple of weeks in Louisiana, a defensive lineman coming out of Acadiana. So they're trending, I think, towards it being a normal year in Louisiana. It's just not really top heavy. And it's not every year like a year ago where you've got 3 quarterbacks who are all going high level out of Louisiana. It's not often you've got the number 1 player in the country in Arch Manning, but they also had a ton of top 100 guys a year ago. They had multiple 5-stars, including one that LSU signs in Zalance Hurd, an offensive tackle out of Neville. There's not that group, but I think everything from like 100 to, 4-star right outside the top 300 is going to be there. And at the end of the day, that's really where you're building the majority of your Louisiana class out of, the base out of. You're only going to have a couple of guys each year who have that 5-star label next to them. I think it's going to be a normal year. Just looking at the numbers, I just don't think we ever see anybody hit 5-star range. And I don't think that's not out of the complete norm.
Yeah, I think for me, when I look at the state, and you mentioned the 5-star debate, and there's certainly going to be somebody, maybe 1 or 2 that do emerge and do jump up into that conversation even more. I mean, you got to circle Dominic McKinley right now with just how highly recruited he is, his size, his production. He's somebody that's unranked by just about everybody right now. He's going to obviously get a ranking here shortly, but he's picked up Alabama, Georgia, LSU, Ohio State. He's been to Oklahoma and Texas along with LSU. Just caught up with him late last night. And he's very early in the recruiting process. But one thing that stands out is go flip on the tape. And he's productive. He's dominant. He's got that type of, I think, ceiling. Just kind of going back through, and after talking with him, I spent a good bit of the morning kind of just trying to find out as much as I could about his recruiting process. He was at LSU offensive line, defensive line camp last year when the 7-on-7 camp was going on. Kind of flew under the radar, but was there. So he's been to LSU before, taking a quiet visit before the dead period. I think when you try to circle, all right, who's that top end guy? Because we hear about it on our board. It seems like there's somebody from Louisiana that's going to end up being a first round draft pick every year. And so trying to find that guy, and it doesn't necessarily mean you dish out a 5-star ranking just because of those odds. It makes it a little bit more difficult task, but you've got to remember that somebody in this class out of Louisiana is probably going to emerge as that high end draft pick. And for me, I start with Dominic McKinley, and I think he's going to be a big riser in the rankings when they're done. And he's somebody that we're continuing to gather more data. He's really a quiet young man who just is still figuring things out right now as far as the recruiting process goes. You mentioned, Wardell Mack, the number one player for On3 right now in Louisiana. He's a huge LSU target. He's somebody that, when you look at corner, LSU's always tried to get the top corner in Louisiana. They tend to be players that, LSU is right in the mix for. And certainly with Wardell Mack, that's the case. We saw Juwan Johnson, who's a nickel, but plays quarterback for LCA, commit to Colorado. That recruitment might not be over. But then you get to Tylen Singleton, who's the number 3 prospect in the state. And I think when you try to project some of these linebackers, and linebacker is notoriously difficult to evaluate, he stands out to me as somebody that could jump up, maybe make a move because he's been that safety that has grown into a linebacker. He can run, he can cover. LSU is going to be right in the mix for him as well. They're probably going to get him on campus in March. He visited Texas A&M, and I think got to a couple other campuses quietly in January. But he's somebody that they've got to circle. And I feel like with his skill set, could earn himself some of that recognition to be in that conversation. So Dominic McKinley and Tylen Singleton are the 2 right now in Louisiana to me that really jump out as far as that potential to be in the 5-star conversation. You go down the list and, just getting out to 7-on-7 and some of these different camps that are going to be really popping up soon, the Under Armour camps and the underclassmen reports that are coming up in the next couple of weeks. You look at some of these players that are emerging, and we're finding more and more out about Louisiana in 2024 as we get out there. One player, and you wrote him up as a potential offer for LSU, and right after that, I caught up with him at a 7-on-7 camp. Deshaun McBride out of Denham Springs. You talk about production and trying to project that. He's got that. I mean, just dominant on the field. He's got that size, that length. Kind of reminds me of a similar body type to a Grant Delpit. LSU's not offered, but they're going to get him on campus in March. It wouldn't be surprising to me to see LSU make an offer there. It's an interesting situation that LSU's in. They've got Maurice Williams committed as a safety right now. He could grow into a linebacker. We'll talk about that a little bit later on the podcast. But with the safety position, this is a critical year for LSU to really replenish that group in 2024. And I feel like when you look at the in-state guys, they could have they could have made a late move on a lot of guys in 2023 that play safety, but they ended up not. They're going to be, looking for somebody to emerge, I think, in Louisiana in 2024 at this position. And it seems like Deshaun McBride is that guy. We have him right now and On3 as an 89. So right on the cusp of a 4-star player. I think his development is trending up, and he just had a terrific junior year as well.
Yeah, look, and as you begin to name names, look at the offensive line and a guy like Kavion Broussard coming out of Zachary, who has some big SEC offers and has visited LSU and has the attention of the staff, and he could get offered. And see, the more I think about it, as you were talking about guys like Deshaun McBride and mentioning, or at least you kind of think about their 8 commitments already. I said before, Louisiana doesn't give you 3 D1 high-level D1 quarterbacks every year. Like Arch Manning, Holstein, Ricky Collins, they were all in this prior class. That doesn't happen every year. Right now, there isn't that big-name quarterback in Louisiana for this cycle. So LSU had to leave the state to get it. They get Colin Simmons. He reclassifies. He joins the class. He's one of the top quarterbacks in the country. So then you think, okay, where are our needs? Well, you always want defensive linemen. You always want offensive linemen, but you need some big linebackers in this class. You need a safety or two in this class. You need guys who, whether it's tight end, different spots, receiver and DB, Louisiana will always give you. But my point being, right now, even on their offer sheet in Louisiana, they've got all those things. There's 3 interior defensive linemen that they've already offered. There's already an edge rusher in Kalaj Cobbins. There's already an elite linebacker in Tylen Singleton. There's already DBs out there that whether they are going after like Mack and guys like that, or guys they could offer like McBride. And then on the offensive line, they have Kyrie Lee committed, one of the top offensive linemen in the state. Then they could move on guys like Kavion Broussard. So I do feel like Louisiana gives them a lot, at least right now, out of the gates, of positions they do need to address. And they've made the early offers and they've begun recruiting them. So not just Louisiana could give them double-digit signees, which would be the norm, but I actually do feel like they fit a lot of the positions that they actually need help with.
Yeah, and Xavier Atkins now playing his high school football in the state of Texas is going to be interesting to see if LSU can hold on to him. He's been pretty adamant that LSU is the place he wants to be, but obviously now he's going to a place that is going to get plenty of foot traffic. As far as college coaches and getting seen a little bit more. He was kind of an unknown in a sense coming off this past season, but now he's going to be heavily recruited by other programs. Texas A&M had him on campus. He'll get back to LSU, and I feel like with Xavier Atkins, you have a linebacker that you could certainly build a class around. He's a kind of a true middle linebacker who's still finding his way as a really good athlete. The cornerback spot, we mentioned Wardell Mack. They do have Wallace Foster out of Warren Easton committed. He's kind of a nickel, I think, in that sense, about 5'10", 160 pounds. He had some quality offers before he committed to LSU. And, I think this is where, and we're going to see it as the camps unfold this spring, and coaches will get tape of that. And then they'll get these guys on campus and get to see them in person. And then they'll watch them in spring ball and then have them camp this summer. It's going to be interesting to see if we see LSU make some of the big moves and extend a good number of offers. I mean, we talked about Deshaun McBride. We talked about Kavion Broussard. Those stick out to me right away, but they have one wide receiver offer in the state out right now in Kobe Young. Do they move on someone else out there? You have guys like Josh Jackson at St. Aug who's been evaluated. There's Elijah Garrick at Lake Charles College Prep. There's some other talented skill position guys that will have the chance to earn offers over the course of this offseason. I feel like you had some high-profile guys jump out early in this cycle, like a Tradez Green, like a Tylen Singleton, a Wardell Mack, Demarion Johnson, Melvin Hills. Both of those, Melvin Hills and Demarion Johnson, 2 of the top defensive tackles in the state. Then you have a guy like Dominic McKinley who's picking up steam. As coaches are out to see him in January. So this state is very interesting this cycle to me because they had these high profile guys that have been around a while. Obviously, Brian Kelly's only been here a year now, but they've been on the radar a while. So how do they navigate that versus going after some of these guys and potentially offering some of these guys that kind of blow up over the course of the spring is going to be really interesting to me. We never saw, I wouldn't say never, but we didn't really see them make that move on some of the other players in 2023, like Amar Javius Moss, Marquez Stevenson, guys like that who were in the class last year, and they just didn't end up making the move on them. The only guy that jumps out at me that they made that move on is Dylan Carpenter out of Santa Ma. So as this staff, and I think you and I have talked about this, I think they're going to move a little bit more regionally this cycle. They're going to be a little bit more careful as far as where they spend resources way out nationally. This is where, okay, does the light come on a little bit more for some of those Louisiana late offers and late evaluations? That's going to be the interesting thing to me.
I'm with you right there. And this is a much bigger picture story, so I'm not going to go into it. But the reality is, in my opinion, and I think the data will show this in the coming years, especially in places like Louisiana, if you're recruiting locally during the transfer portal era, that's going to help. Kids are less likely to leave if they're from Louisiana or they're from East Texas or they're from the Gulf Coast and their parents can still come to every game. They're willing to wait until a couple of years in or a few years in to really get a big role on the team instead of a kid from another state, maybe far away, who gets in and after a year or two says, you know what, like Corey Kiner at running back, a cycle or two ago, comes in and plays some, but ultimately says, I'm going to go back home and goes back to Cincinnati. It just makes more sense to build your roster with guys who are more likely to stay on your roster. So, because of that, I love the approach. I'm interested to see how it plays out. And I'm selling all my stock or people's stock who are saying that it's a down year in Louisiana. I don't think that at all. I just think it's not a very top heavy year in Louisiana.
Yeah, I think that's the right way to put it. I mean, when the first 2024 rankings came out, from On3, and there's going to be updates. It's coming this month. People were like, "Oh my gosh, there's one top 100 prospect. It's Wardell Mack. What are you guys doing?" Well, look, I mean, it might just be one of those years where it could end up being that way. I talked about Dominic McKinley. I talked about Tylen Singleton. I think those are two guys that could push up into that conversation to be top 50 and in 5-star range. And that's just my opinion on them. But if you look at Louisiana, if it's giving you guys from, let's just use the rating points, 89 to 95, and it's a really good group of 10 guys, that's a good position to be in for LSU. They have somebody who's lower rated, like Wallace Foster and Kyrie Lee, but they also have some guys out there that Deshaun McBride, a Kavion Broussard, for example, that they could offer, who are on the rise and really moving up. It seems like, at least in their stock, and of course Dominic McKinley is about to be rated as well. So it's an interesting year in Louisiana. I think there's going to be a lot of debate over should they offer, should they not. Some of these guys that really come through and pick up some serious recruiting steam in the spring. I mean, seems like last year, Brad Davis goes out and signs one of the best offensive line classes in the country, but a guy like Ethan Fields, they evaluated, they had him on campus, he was in for camp, and they ultimately just felt good about their evaluation. So there's going to be players that, because they're from Louisiana, certainly garner that attention and interest. And LSU is doing their due diligence on Louisiana. I can say that. I feel good about what they're doing in their evals, and it's just going to be interesting to see if they do end up making the moves. And look, you mentioned the transfer portal. The fact is, if you don't want to reach on a kid who's from Louisiana, who's going to want to stay for 4 to 5 years, even if he's not a big role player, it's almost better to go out in the transfer portal and minimize some risk and take somebody who's maybe only got 2 to 3 years left and can kind of help you right away, instead of taking somebody you might view as a reach. So it's ever changing, as far as these evaluations go. But I like the way LSU's evaluating the state so far in 2024.